Welcome to the Kinkology Podcast. This is your host, relationship and sex therapist, Kaylee Rose Friedman, and this is your permission slip to stop shoulding all over yourself, let go of shame, and learn to embody your most authentic sexual self. Hi, Carmen. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited. I have been following you on Instagram for a minute, and your prolific Instagram lives are always playing in the background of my drives, and I just really appreciate the nuance that you bring to the topic of consent. So when I reached out and you said yes about being a guest on the podcast, I was like so stoked about it. Okay, let me introduce you to the people. So Carmen Leilani de Jesus is a consent and intimacy educator, a resilience and liberation consultant, and an executive coach focused on helping people to cultivate somatic discernment, integrity, and embodied equanimity. I love that. Embodied equanimity is so good. She serves as faculty for the School of Consent, guest faculty for the Surrogate Partner Collective, and offers consulting and coaching to leaders and organizations. She offers work of the Wheel of Consent through a lens which centers reclaiming agency, decolonizing the body, and cultivating resilience through boundaries, equity, and prioritizing joy.
Joy!
Yeah! Fight the power with joy and pleasure.
Absolutely.
So I would love to just jump in and talk about what the Wheel of Consent is. I know that it's very nuanced, and people take workshops to try to kind of unpack all there is there. But I really appreciate the conversations that it started, which is why, for me in my own life, which is why I wanted to bring you in. So could you just give us like your elevator speech about what it actually is, and maybe a little bit about how you came to your work in general?
Yes, I can. But also there's so many ways to introduce this. So I think I would love it if it's okay to just give a little bit of a background from what I know of its origin. And then I'll tell you about my personal interpretation and elevator pitch, because it might sound different than my other colleagues, because it's landed in my body differently. So first and foremost, the Wheel of Consent is a framework and a set of practices, somatic practices, for understanding relational dynamics, created by Dr. Betty Martin, I guess over 30 or even 40 years ago. And Betty created it at the time that she created it, before even it was called Like a Pro, but when she was still developing this body of work. And it was created to bring an awareness of an education to people like Betty, who was working as a touch provider at that time and as a body worker, and to bring the awareness and education to practitioners so that practitioners could have it and their clients could have it, about how to notice and communicate their desires and their limits, to protect both the client and the practitioner from going along with something they didn't want to do or weren't ready for. So that was how I came into this work when I first came across it, I think in 2012, 2013. And so it was first developed for touch practitioners, and to give them language and processes for creating clarity and creating safer containers for themselves and their clients. So this evolved over time because more and more people started to hear about it, and then it turned into more than just touch practitioners, and really started to highlight that this is not just about touch. We can start with touch, but really as Betty's work was evolving and developing, she realized that this was about learning and understanding a new way of understanding the dynamics between what it means to give and what it means to receive, and what it means to actually create a clear agreement, which is what consent is in this model. So it's different than previous models of consent, which really focus on consent as a kind of permission, which it is. So somebody wants something, and so I'm going to go and, do I have your consent? Check A, yeah, check yes or no, and then once you check yes, then like, great, we have a contract, that's consent. But that doesn't work in all situations, and frankly, the binary doesn't work because there's so much else between yes and no. So the Wheel of Consent, it's a model that helps us to first tap into our own awareness of what feels authentic in terms of yes, no, desire, limit, and gives us this language and these practices and these tools to help us discern, apart from all of the ways we have been conditioned and indoctrinated to go along with things, either by how we were socialized, how, our families of origin, whatever. I mean, for me, like the colonization that has happened to my people, which I'm Filipino American, and so many other people are coming to terms with, wow, colonization, where somebody came in and took something without asking and then implanted something that says, okay, now I am saying this is the way. This is what you should want. This is what we're doing. This is who owns this now. And realizing I didn't actually want any of that. That's not actually how I feel. But all of these external factors, including trauma, has, I think, created disconnects from ourselves and our bodies, dissociations, because of all the ways that our authentic reactions have been squashed or minimized or dismissed or told we're not as important as what's happening in the outside world or outside of yourself. So it is a framework for relating. It's a set of practices, and it's a way to help us take responsibility for what we want and what we don't want, and communicate that to one another in ways that we can do that with respect and without shaming. And I think that's pretty liberatory for lots of us. It also helps us to discern the difference between what we are wanting to do and willing to do. So it's a liberatory model for relating, I think.
Can I ask you to go back to wanting versus willing? That feels juicy. Can you say more about that?
Yes. So we call that, at the School of Consent, as part of the Wheel of Consent framework, a spectrum of response. So on that spectrum, on one end is the big fuck yes, I want that. And the other side is like, no, I don't want this at all. I am literally I'm either being forced to do this and I have zero choice, or I don't want to exist in this world because I can't do this, and I'm being exploited. I am literally being forced and coerced. And in the middle of that, from pole to pole, in that section moving from the wanting area, is where we explore, what do I want for me? What are my desires? What do I say yes to because I want it for me? And then moving across, maybe the want is not as like, yeah, but it's sort of like, okay. And then moving into not wanting for yourself, but being willing to do something or engage in an activity. And when you're exploring your willingness, you're kind of exploring your terms. Like, under what situation, under what terms would I say yes to something, to this thing that you're asking me? Maybe it's that I'm willing to do it once. I'm willing to do it for you, but not you. I'm willing to do it I'm willing to go to Costco with you on a Tuesday, but not a Saturday because it's too crowded. And then it moves along that willingness, and for most of us, and I'll say the global majority, a lot of us live in the space of willingness where it's like, I have to do this for money. That is my term. That is my limit. I'm not going to say yes to this unless there's money attached. Right?
Yay capitalism.
Well, yay capitalism, and also yay survival, right? And then so moving beyond that, if there's like, and so some of us can say, yeah, I want this much or I'm not going to do it. And some of us are like, I have to take what is on offer if I want to pay my rent, if I want to feed my family. And then there begins the descent. I don't know, like that's a descent, but it's like the progression of, I am less and less willing to do this, and the terms are less and less acceptable to me. And so we're moving into, I am enduring this, or I'm tolerating this, I'm enduring this, or I'm literally subjecting myself because I have to, because I don't have choices, to exploitation, to all the way to I'm in a full-blown trauma response, and I can't even really verbalize my true and authentic choice in this matter, and I'm being forced, I'm being coerced. So yeah, that to me was one of the most profound things to learn that helped me go beyond this binary of there's just yes or no, and maybe there's a maybe in between, but the maybes can also be like, maybe can be great, can be a portal of possibility. Like, maybe, tell me more. But there's also the maybe that's like, I am too afraid to say no. Maybe. It's like what you say. It's what you say sometimes when you don't feel safe to say no. It's what you say to a child maybe that's asking you a million times, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And you can't say yes. And you're like, yeah, maybe. And, so the distinction between wanting to and willing to is one of the most useful things that I think we offer in this framework, because it actually speaks to the spectrum of what's between fuck yeah, I want this for me, and I am literally being forced to do something.
I think that's such an important and complex nuance to add to what you hear often as being really simplistic conversations about consent, and that binary of if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no, which makes a nice slogan, but then in real life, there's so much more complexity to that. And I love that framework of moving along a spectrum. I think it also takes the idea of a hierarchy out of it. I don't know if you've worked with people or felt this yourself, but I know as a recovering people pleaser myself and someone that's had to work on boundaries and communication in all areas of life, I have often felt shame when I was more willing than wanting. And I didn't have that like language to describe that, and I was seeing willingness as just kind of a blanket negative thing, when there's actually like so much nuance in considering, and I love that, just the idea of a spectrum, how in my own mind it takes it from this vertical hierarchy of you did good because you were in alignment with yourself, you did bad because you compromised or sacrificed something, to this horizontal spectrum where that feels like it takes the charge out of it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because, yeah, willingness is, I used to think of willingness in that way of like, yeah, willingness kind of went along with martyrdom, even in some instances, right? Where it's like, I knew I didn't want to, but here I am saying yes, That's a weird
I think about, this is a funny example, but I think about a friend of mine who, I have a dog and she has cats, and we're often helping each other out with the animals, and we love each other, and so we both want that mutual support. But are either of us driving to the other person's house to feed their animal and being like, this is a hell yes? Probably not. It's probably like, I love my friend and I'm willing to do this slightly inconvenient thing for them.
Yeah, and would you do that for somebody else?
Good question. So bringing this idea into BDSM and kink, where there's power dynamics and we're playing with power, I'm curious. And so then we need all this nuance in those situations. What do you think, what comes up when you think about applying wanting and willing spectrum in that kind of a dynamic?
What are those checklists called? The checklist.
The yes, no, maybes. Yeah, yes, no, maybe. Exactly what you were saying earlier.
That's exactly. And so, but, just to rewind it just a little bit around, like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. I mean, yeah, like, okay, binary, but also, and then this idea that our responses can be on a spectrum. But I think when you don't have time, when you're in a scene, when you're in a situation where it's like, and you don't even have the language that we have, that around wanting and willing and all of this nuanced consent language, I'm not throwing that hell yes or hell no out, even though it feels binary, because it can be useful for those who are not yet aware of where their limits are or comfortable speaking to their boundaries, and who, especially when you're in mid-action, still have a tendency to go along, even when they're like, I'm not really like that. I don't really, okay, maybe, where's my little flag or cloth or whatever to say yellow or whatever it is, like, to ask for a pause. And so in those instances, and I'm talking just in terms of harm reduction here. Yeah. If you're not a hell yes, then maybe say no and feel into it so that you don't feel pressured just to say yes. Right?
Thank you for that, because I think I'll just share that, like, as a therapist who's working with a particular population, I live alone, I work remote, I have my like little bubble of kink friends, and I'm often in my own little like safety bubble that I've created for myself. That is such a privilege, and to have the language that I have, and to have the understanding and the time to have studied what I've studied is also such a privilege. So I really appreciate you not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which is sometimes easy for me to do, because being aware of a spectrum of experiences and realities, some more, maybe blunt tools is like sounding a little judgmental, but I just mean like broad, can be like the only tool available right now.
Yeah.
And That's important. So thank
It's
you for
important,
bringing that
especially
in.
when you know there's like, we want to reduce harm for folks who don't have access to what you've had access to, what I've had access to in terms of these learnings and the language. But I also want to leave one more piece, is that if it's not, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Yes, it's useful, but also I will also want the space for, well, I'm willing to try it for a minute to see if I like it. Where's that in play?
Right.
Right? Because sometimes I don't know yet. You want to do that thing? I've never done that before. That feels like I might think it's weird. I might like it. I have no idea yet. So
right. That's the whole,
yeah.
The whole point of play, right, is experimenting.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I will also say play is not within the wheel of consent.
Interesting. I know this is probably like a whole weekend workshop, but for people who haven't seen the Wheel of Consent, which I will link in the show notes, okay, but who have no concept of what's on it, can you give a little overview tutorial?
I've got a wheel behind me, but it's all reversed and stuff like that. I don't really know how useful that is, but that is the Wheel of Consent behind me. And the Wheel of Consent is divided into a side over here, which is the giving side, and the side over here, which is the receiving side. And then there's a hemisphere up here where you are doing the action, and a hemisphere down here where you are the one who the action is being done to. And how you locate yourself within this wheel, which includes taking and allowing, the dynamics of taking and allowing, and the dynamics of serving and accepting. Oh, there it is. I was wondering what was that. Oh, great.
I threw it up there for you.
Then this answers the question. This wheel is built on two questions. Who is it for, and who is doing or being done to? So on the side of the wheel that is receiving, as you can see, it says, it's for you. So there are two ways where you can receive, where it's for you. And this is where the typical understanding of what it means to receive something, that something comes to you and you're receiving it. Whether or not you want it is not it is not defined in receiving. It's just like, oh, something came in your direction, you're like, okay. So in this model, receiving is asking for something that you want to come to you, right? So, but in the hemispheres of you are doing and they are doing, so you are doing, you're going to be the one taking the action, but it is for you. It's something that, I want to do something to you, Kaylee. May I give you a massage? And this is the worst. And I'm going to use this example because it's the worst example. Yeah, I'm going to empower myself. That's the worst example. But it's also not the worst example. Because here I am saying, may I give you a massage? My real desire, if I'm honest, is that I just want to touch you. I just want to be able to have the experience of getting my hands on you. Maybe I don't feel like I can just say, hey, Kaylee, may I pet your hair for the next 3 minutes? So here I am saying, may I give you a massage? Now let's ask ourselves, who is that for? Well, ostensibly, it sounds like it's for Kaylee, because I'm saying, I want to give you something. Which puts you into like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess that sounds nice. I guess that's supposed to be for me. But if I'm honest, it's that I want to touch you, Kaylee. And may I do this? May I touch you in this way for this many minutes or whatever is really my desire, right? And so that's being honest with what I want.
So if we are honest, does that move us into a different quadrant?
No.
In that example,
well, I mean, in this example, okay. So in this example, if it moves me into it. If I say, "May I touch you, Kaylee?" for my pleasure, for the next 3 minutes by petting your hair, I am now asking you what I really want, which puts me into take, because what keeps me into take, because I'm taking action for my benefit, for my pleasure. And you, in the allow quadrant across from that, are checking in with your limits, responding to my request, to my desire. It's not your desire. And, how does that feel? Does that actually feel good to me? Is that a gift that, and really, when you're in allow, it's not about what you want, it's what you're willing to do. So talking about the want and willing. So on the receiving end, we're on the receiving hemisphere, we're talking about, it's for me, it's my want. I want something. And on the giving, what makes you a giver is that you're checking in with whatever the request is and thinking and asking yourself, what am I actually willing to do? Where are my limits? Those limits we talked about earlier. What are the terms? So now, if you told me, Carmen, I would be okay with that for 1 minute. Yes, you can do that for like 1 minute. And you're not allowed to, please don't pull my hair. That's a limit for me. But yes, you can pet my head softly for 1 minute. That is the negotiation. And then I say, okay, great. I heard your limit. And you can rest knowing that I have heard your limit. I'm going to respect it. And that at any time, even 30 seconds in, even if you said, okay, you can do it for a minute, if I was doing it like too hard or whatever, you could be like, you know what? Pause. I'm no longer available for that. Or can we do something different? Or can you change the way that you're doing that? Or, you know what? I tried it and I'm actually not as available for that as I thought I was. And then I'm like, okay, great. Hands off. Having that experience of me saying like, there's a want that I want and it's for me, and I'm not desire smuggling it into something that I'm trying to pretend is for you.
Desire smuggling. I've never heard that.
Oh, please let me big up my dear friend and colleague, Marsha Paczynski. Marsha Paczynski is the co-founder of Cuddle Party and also the author of Creating Consent Culture, and coined the term desire smuggling a while ago to connote like all the reasons why we don't ask for what we want and what we do instead, to try to because there's a billion reasons. We generate this when we teach Like a Pro and in Wheel of Consent. Why don't we ask for what we want? And we solicit that from people. Like the list is endless, gigantic, exhaustive, and heartbreaking, and can bring us into so much more compassion for ourselves and each other, acknowledging that it is freaking hard, so vulnerable to ask for what you want, especially if you were socialized not to, if you were told and received all kinds of messages that it's not okay to do that, it's not safe to do that. So these ways of taking who is doing and who it's for apart is not meant to say that let's do these things in every single interaction in our lives, but this practice illuminates these dynamics, makes them clear to us where we have not been attuning to ourselves, advocating for our desires, advocating for our limits, and helping us develop tools to do so, and flex and like just practice and build those muscles, because it is vulnerable for everyone. And this idea of taking especially can be so, so vulnerable, because take already has this inherent in this mainstream, I'll just say Western American culture, taking is like, you know, and that's not what this is.
Hello. I'm so sorry. Lost my Wi-Fi.
Hey, it happens. It happens all the time.
You were on a roll too.
I know. We'll never get it back. No, just kidding.
The spirit was moving you.
We'll just have to ramp back up into it is all.
I'm curious to hear about, so those reasons why people are blocked from asking for what they need, I think is what we were kind of talking about. That exhaustive list of what we're afraid of losing, or what will happen, or cultural narratives, or, you know, the list goes on and on. What do you find helps people move past those things, or manage them, or, you know, like, what's the process look like when you work with people in these workshops, that you see people move from stuck to expressing their desires or boundaries?
There's a real beautiful way that our trainings have been sequenced. The practices are sequenced so they are scaffolding learning, building blocks, all the way up to whatever we do at the end, depending on what kind of training it is. And the one thing that we start with first is feeling for your authentic and embodied yes or no. Because if you don't have access to that, it can be difficult and challenging to truly participate in any of the other practices, because being able to authentically tune in, if somebody is going to, especially if we're moving into touch-based practices, or any kind of play, for example, if we're doing some kind of kink scene, how do you know if the person that you are working with or playing with is actually ready to do whatever it is that y'all talked about? How do you know that a person is ready to give or receive touch to somebody? How do you know? And part of what we do is saying, okay, let's find it in our bodies first. Let's feel what it feels like in this container that we take a lot of time to build, this container of safety, knowing that safety is relative. And there cannot be absolute safety, and the absence of discomfort is not the same as safety, all of those things, right? Just knowing that, for example, so many of us have maybe never had access to really being able to say no to things we wanted to say no to. How many of us have that fawning, that people pleaser, that or that level of unsafety or worry or concern about punishment if I don't comply? If I don't just say, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine, you know?
Except when you want to be punished.
Yes, that's a different other follow-up podcast, which will be super fun to do. But what I'm saying is that, so we start there. Can we help people, first of all, knowing that embodiment can be very challenging. It's not always safe to be in our bodies, depending on our life experiences. So it makes sense that people are disconnected. It makes sense that there's a level of dissociation. It makes sense that it's like, if I slow down and allow myself to feel how tired I am, I will feel it, and I may never get up. And I'll say that I've seen it from so many of my immigrant family who had to work so hard and they're not thinking about embodiment and like, oh, let me just, this is my capacity, so I'm not going to go beyond that. That's just not available for all of the reasons, for survival, for assimilation, for I need to take care of my family. So I want to give all of those caveats because I think it's not spoken about enough. That not everyone has the same level of access to like full embodiment, and like embodiment is so hot right now. So like, okay, but let's also talk about how that's really scary for some people. Yeah. And so that is a component when we go into like, can I find my yes or no? Sometimes it doesn't even come out. And working with that. Because we ask people to feel for the no, find it in your body. Where did you feel it? Can you describe like, oh, my yes was like open and like whatever. And like my no was so strong. But then there's so many other reactions, so many other flavors of like my no couldn't even make it past my throat. So staying with that first so that people can have that experience, can maybe find even an inkling. I try to offer as many access points as possible. It's like, okay, if you're having a hard time maybe finding that no, can you think of one thing that like, if somebody offered it to you, you'd be like, yeah, no, immediately no. Sorry, no.
I love that. I immediately thought of eating escargot when you said that.
Mine is like anything with cilantro. Immediately no.
Ooh,
no.
Yes.
No. Sorry, no. Right? And then also, can you think of something if somebody offered it to you? You would be immediately yes. For me, hard shell, crispy tacos.
Ooh, can't go wrong there unless you put the cilantro on it.
Yes, of course. Yes. See, there you go. But the point being is that helping people to find these somatic experiences of like, what does it feel like to actually feel yes? What does it feel like to actually feel and say no? So important as a building block. Because once you can, that's where the self-trust begins.
And I'm just thinking, as you're describing this exercise, how many folks are just like jumping into kink dynamics, BDSM experiences, or just sexual experiences, and then trying to find their no in the middle of this high intensity relational moment where all our conditioning is present and our nervous systems are activated, and to be in that setting and trying to do this work that you're talking about, that feels pretty far apart. So just like naming the baby steps that it can take for most of us to be able to find our no in that high intensity, activated, higher risk situation. It takes a lot of intention to get there.
It does. And that's why building up from these small practices, and that's why that's why Betty Martin calls this the wheel of consent is a practice. It's a set of practices. It's not something that it's a one and done. It's not something that any one of us at the school or Betty herself or who have been studying this for years and years and years are like, yes, I'm an expert in it and I'm so good at all of the things. It's not true. It's just that we are more aware, which gives us more access to choice. And we exercise those choices as best we can according to the situation we're in, how safe we feel, how resourced we are, the obligations that we have. So it's absolutely one of the building blocks. And this is what, for me, I'm like, oh, what am I doing here? So we just call it finding yes or no in the body and the wheel. For me, it's like I am literally cultivating my somatic discernment. I am using my body as a tool to discern the truth of how I feel about something. And if you felt betrayed by your body before, for reasons, of which there are many, most often seen of which is that, I had to adapt myself to what was happening to me because I didn't have a choice. So all of these small things are so crucial, so foundational, so transformative for reclaiming agency, for reclaiming self-trust, for building it. And that's what's going to give you the tool. If we're talking about tools, like my whole body, my somatic responses are a set of tools that can give me information about how do I really feel, about what I really want to do, or what I want to stop. And that is already gold for so many people.
I mean, yeah, that's invaluable. To be able to get to that point is more than a lot of people will honestly experience in their lives. That's nothing. So let's say I'm with a partner and we're negotiating a kink scene, and I bring my wheel of consent and I slap it down on the table in between us. How can we play with it? Could you give like a example of an idea or a game or a practice that we could actually apply it in a negotiation situation for kinky folks?
This is one of the easiest questions to answer, because so much of the wheel and the dynamics Betty developed after playing this 3-minute game, which Betty did not create. The 3-minute game was created by somebody named Harry Faddis, and Betty learned about it in a workshop with Harry that was around kink and power. Okay? And the original questions of the 3-minute game are, what do you want to do? What do you want to do to me?
Love that.
And what do you
Good starting point.
And what do you want me to do to you? Which is pretty much kind of how all kink scenes were going to start. And then, so she adapted it and turned it into, how do you want to touch me for your pleasure? Which puts me into the allow. Right?
And I'm in take if I'm the other person.
You'd be in take. And then also the initiating question of the 3-minute game is, how would you like me to touch you for your pleasure? So that's the other dynamic, which is serve accept.
I like that one.
Right? And so from these questions, which can open up any kink conversation, you can learn a host of information. Because what's happening is, it is incepting this process wherein, if I ask you, how do you want to touch me for your pleasure? That means, A, you have to not think, and like I teach this in all of my classes. I put in my own sauce in all of the ways that I teach. And one of them is when I'm teaching people how to get into the take quadrant, when they're touching somebody for their pleasure, they're the ones taking action, but it's for them. And even if the person who is across from me in the allow quadrant experiences pleasure, pleasure is not the indicator of who it's for. You can experience pleasure in any quadrant. Something that's good to know. But the point being, if you're going to go into a scene, if you're going to go on a first date with somebody or a second date with somebody, the 3-minute game is the new 7 minutes in heaven. And I've also aged myself because, I don't know, there's only a certain demographic of people who even know what that reference is to. What's 7 minutes in heaven? What the hell is that? What does that mean? It's like, when you go into a closet with a bunch, there's a bunch of kids, there's a party. I'm like, who went to parties like that? I didn't. But the point being is that, if people were taught, if even teens were taught, this is a way to be able to make it a game. This is a way that takes out, that actually allows us not to say, may I have your consent, please? Thank you.
Right.
Sorry, it's dry. Nobody really wants to say those words, but learning about, does this person know what they want, or am I gonna have to guess?
That's a recipe for disaster.
I know. Can this person ask for what they want if they know what they want? And if I don't like that, can this person negotiate with me to get to a place where we can both feel comfortable exploring? And, if this person wants to do something to me that, like, I'm not really a fuck yeah, but I'm kind of curious, but I'm not always no. So I'm willing, but can we just do it for 3 minutes? Because, that feels like long enough that I'm not necessarily enduring something horrible if I don't really like it. And also speaking to the fact that, and we can change our minds at any time. Mm-hmm. So there, 3-minute game came from the kink world. Put it back in the kink world in the same way, with the same questions, because that's the way to negotiate the desires and limits within this practice, which is pretty much everything to me that I ever learned about negotiation in kink is like, okay, you've got desires, I've got limits, let's match them up until we get to a place where okay, you know what, I'm good with that, okay, game on,
Yeah, this offers a really playful and in-depth and nuanced way to explore all of those things, which I think builds so much intimacy for people when they're having these conversations and going through these exercises. And it can be as simple or as complex, I think, as you want it to be once you kind of understand the framework and yourself a little bit more. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. It was amazing. Tell people if they want to dive deeper and really sink their teeth into this and understand more and apply it in their lives. What are you offering? How can they work with you? How can they find you? Tell the people where to find you.
Okay. Yeah. How do I want to be found? Well, there's a couple ways to find me. If you just want to find me on the schoolofconsent.org. I'm on the website there under faculty. Also, I'm teaching for the School of Consent. I teach Like a Pro, which is a 5-day training for professionals who want to learn the Wheel of Consent and learn how to use it with their clients one-on-one. I'm doing a BIPOC-only cohort in Oakland in April. If you just want to learn a little bit more about me, on my website, which is consentisapractice.com. Coincidentally, that is also my personal handle on Instagram at consentisapractice. But I also manage the Wheel of Consent Instagram account as well, so you can find me there. And the last thing that I really want to say is that this building of consent culture, the sharing with people about what it means to learn to recover your agency and how it affects how we practice being sovereign beings is so important, especially because we're moving into, it feels like an era where compliance and coercion are being activated on purpose all over the place and putting us all into this collective trauma response. And as we know as consent educators, when you're in that trauma response, can you actually consent? Can you actually say yes or no or stand up for what you don't want to go along with? It's so important right now. So I'm really honored to do this work.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing everything that you shared and doing this work. And I can't wait to see how your nonprofit unfolds, and hopefully I can support that as well. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kaylee. I enjoyed this conversation. It was pretty cool talking to you. I would love to know more about you at some time too. And thank you for doing the work that you do.
I have a few asks for you. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it so you don't miss any of these juicy conversations. If you enjoyed the episode, as always, rate and review it. If you didn't enjoy it, keep it moving. Share the episode with one friend or partner, and let's keep this conversation going. Follow me on Instagram at Kinkologypod. Thank you for listening. And remember, you deserve to live boldly, love deeply, and kink authentically. Stay curious, friends.